Hey everyone, how you all doing today? Voice of Reason 467 here. So, I wanted to make it very clear here that this is going to be a very different type of video. I'm not going to be going through the entire thing here because, to be perfectly honest, there's a lot I agree with Rick Worley that I disagree on. However, there's some things that he's massively misunderstanding what's going on here for the record. Now, He-Man never really had the type of stuff that he's going on about with regards to it only being a simple cartoon meant to sell kids, really. The He-Man franchise Masters of the Universe expands not just a 1981 cartoon, but also an attempted multiple attempts to make multiple different things here. For example, you go to the actual franchise history of the whole thing. Origin of the franchise is what he says it is. Very much the case here. But there's also like mini comics going on here too. You have a second wave of action figures and mini comics here. You have the DC series, which of course it ended up doing a bit of a crossover there. Those are pretty fucking great, by the way. I suggest checking out here. There was the He-Man, the Masters of the Universe Filmation animated series here. That's what he mostly knows of. And then there was the Filmation era Masters of the Universe action figures and mini comics. It's an entire thing here. There's an entire series going on here. She-Ra, obviously. She-Ra was pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. Great film series. But then he goes to Princesses of Power. Into here. Which is great. Princesses of Power storyline. Yada. So yeah, there's a lot of efforts to actually do this. But then you have the Powers of Grayskull. What's that? Well, let's read it. The proposed exploration of the distant past of Eternia, dubbed Preternia, forms the basis of what was originally to be the next incarnation of the toy line, entitled The Powers of Grayskull. However, the toy line was cancelled very early on, with only a few toys released. The main story information originates from the final comic, Powers of Grayskull, The Legend Begins, which was intended as the first of a three-part series. However, only this issue appeared. So yeah, and let's look up other comic books and media here. You obviously have the Star Comics series, which pretty good from what I can recall at the very least. I don't remember really reading much of these, but I remember seeing them in the library when I was a little kid. And the entire thing is building on toys here. But there's also another bit here. There's the New Adventures of He-Man, which is what as I was getting to here. The New Adventures of He-Man literally is an effort to showcase what happens between Adam Skeletor when Adam ends up getting yanked from his own universe, basically isekai'd, if you want a good reference here. Isekai Zero, by the way, great site. Check it out if you want. Here it is, isekai0.ai. There you guys go. A little bit of a bit there of what it is I'm doing here. At any rate, this in particular showcases a lot of interesting growth. It only had a single year to go through. Wasn't all that well received, I guess, at that point in time, but it was basically showing an adult Adam who no longer went between He-Man and Adam. He was now just He-Man. So that was a great show. It was an effort to showcase, of course, that even as the heroes we grow up in emerge, they still have lives of their own that we need to understand and respect. Now, look, if you want to look at it through the lens into which Rick Worley was actually doing it, you can go ahead and do that. But the fact of the matter is that there was an effort in the times in which it was to actually not just have a toy sell line to sell kids and shit like that, even though that is what that was at the end of the day. It was also during the Reagan era of the FTC, attempting to broadcast to various different individuals the idea that, hey, you can't just make a cartoon that's meant to sell toys. You have to make a cartoon that actually has a message in it. You have to make cartoons for kids. If you're making cartoons for kids, to have actual responsible messaging in them. And that's basically what He-Man it was. Every single episode that the original He-Man franchise ended up having there was a message in positive masculinity. Okay, the writers in the documentary. Hold on, real quick. He-Man documentary. Check this out. The Power of Grayskull: The Definitive History of He-Man is a great series. It shows you that by and large, when it comes down to it, the most it shows you that by and large, when it comes down to it, the most
it's as big as a horse, Paul. Compared, look at He-Man. It's as big as a horse. Put a saddle on it.
So, yeah, there was an effort to portray He-Man as incredibly powerful, as incredibly virile, if you would, but also incredibly responsible. Like, at the time, something like this would look goofy as all hell.
Big Jim line. And
When he's saying sometimes you back into these things, what he means is that sometimes you go into these things not realizing how actually cool it actually is. Like, just imagine a giant fucking tiger being ridden by a giant fucking guy with giant fucking muscles, wielding a giant fuck off sword and a fuck off shield coming at you. Your immediate thought is, oh shit, what did I just do? So yeah, for all intents and purposes, that's the type of feel that they were trying to give at here. The creatives behind this were indeed hired to make a toy line, really, but the creators behind it actually took their line very seriously. I mean, look, what's this? What's this? So I want you to imagine for a moment the simple fact that while there was obviously a toy company there meant to sell kids toys and shit like that, the artists behind this work definitively, specifically, like were under a specific, like, strict moral code of an obligation as artists. Like, they didn't just want to sell toys to kids, they also wanted to make sure that a lot of that a lot of these shows actually had moral messages. So yeah, that's why it is He-Man is viewed as a representation of positive masculinity. if we can just, if you look at this from one angle, look at its goofiness. Sure, it looks goofy as all hell. Fine, whatever. It is what it is, at least from your perspective. But from my perspective, this radiates someone who's like positively in touch with who and what he is. That he is a man. He is proud of it. He is basically the himbo He-Man, effectively. That's what He-Man represents to me. He represents quite literally the positive radiating masculinity of himboism in a single specific line, He-Man. In fact, I even made a meme about this on my Facebook. Let me draw your attention to that real quick. It's actually what my specific reference point is. Now, this is actually like my line of lineage here. Hold on. Let's bring it up here. Here we go. When you're the wholesome seraphim daddy, but guarding the black hole sun and reckoning with your Apache, Cherokee, and Celtic ancestry is a whole lot of responsibility. Yeah, and I signed that with my name there. That's my name there. Yeah. So for all intents and purposes, this is what to me He-Man represents. In fact, at the end of the day, as a symbol, this is what He-Man represents. Okay? To say that He-Man is just goofy, childlike shit or whatever that can have no reference point of adulthood whatsoever, and you have to enjoy adult art eventually, when like much of the adult art is cynical, is like very pastiche, it's very like attempting to subvert the expectations of people, when there's no sincerity put forth. Now I'm sorry, that's just bullshit. That's just bullshit. And lest we not forget, this is a little bit of a treat here. Hold on, before we get into it. This is what I grew up. Well, I did watch He-Man back in the day. I did actually watch He-Man. This was the He-Man that resonated with me so much. He-Man 2002 trailer. This was the He-Man that resonated with me so much. Sorry, my YouTube's been having some difficulties here. So yeah, you see, that's what I am like really into for all intents and purposes. I'm into things that take themselves as seriously as they want to be taken. For kids, it was goofy. Yes, it was made to be for kids, but it was made in a certain style that kids at the time could actually support. When this came out, the kids who had seen He-Man were starting to grow up, so they made a new entry into the line dedicated at He-Man fans, but for like people entering their teens. or people who were in their teens, and it was great. And there was still humor in it, by the way. There was still goofiness of it, by the way. There was still elements that were very, shall we say, goofy. But there's always going to be elements of goofiness into that because you're thinking of it as a kid's show rather than an overarching, expansive sort of mythology that can adapt at a given time. Stories are about mythology. Stories are meant to change and to grow with the generations and meant to become what they are. Um, the He-Man Netflix sort of thing that came out. I like the Kevin Smith one. I like the CGI He-Man sort of one as well. The one that's more explicitly for kids. I like that stuff. And the reason why I like it is because it's actually taking its audience seriously in a sense in which it's presenting its audience in certain ways that are meant to be, you know, meant to be referential towards the actual franchise. Now, this is a problem I have with Rick Worley. Let's begin here, shall we? Let's take a listen to that real quick. Let's keep that in mind what he's talking about here, shall we? A toy commercial made by artists, workshop by artists, who wanted to go ahead and make this story as responsible adults, trying to instill into kids an entire generation positive masculine vibes and how to represent themselves as men. Yeah, you see what the problem with this is going with it is, huh? Like it's really really obvious that this guy is like a true cinema snob to the point in which he doesn't understand that he comes off more condescending than anything else. But let's allow him to continue. That right there is the problem here. It's because he's talking about these things as if they're nostalgic feelings, rather than looking at them from the perspective of stories that we would usually tell ourselves when we would play with these things in the universe that was there then. I mean, you've probably had moments in which you've taken toys and would like start like workshopping them in a way. I mean, I remember taking the Megazords I had and workshopping them as some sort of Megazord type council who would oversee the the confines of a thriving multiverse, that kind of shit. That's the stuff I would do as a kid. Once I started getting too old for these toys to make any meaning for them, I made my own meaning out of them. So that's what we do when we grow up. When we grow up, we never stop making stories. We keep telling stories. We tell ourselves stories. We tell other people's stories, and we tell everything else in communication is a story for all intents and purposes. It's because that's how we live as a social species, because that's how we communicate. Our deep primal instincts as an humanoid, human, hominid, ape species is to tell stories between each other and between us.
That's why when a few weeks ago I saw some of the toys for the new movie in a store, I couldn't stop myself from...
And when I say between other and between us, what I mean by that is between each other and between ourselves. Because sometimes we do tell stories to ourselves.
Picking up some of them. And I also have this problem where when I have part of a collection, I hate having an incomplete collection. So after I got those first few toys home, of course, I ended up getting the rest of the first few waves of the movie toys. And so now that I suddenly had a whole collection of toys for this movie, I felt like I had to eventually get around to seeing the actual movie itself. And when I saw it, I was surprised that it was more entertaining than it had any right to be. So then, what separates this movie from other movies that are also corporate IP products like the...
Now, before we get into that, I want to show you guys the actual thing that imprinted on me quite a bit here real quick. Hold on. The one specific franchise that really prompted me into this kind of shit was this particular bit here real quick. So yeah, enjoy. Sorry about that. I gotta go ahead and deal with that after I'm done with this. Now, as pure 80s action energy as that was, and as obviously as a toy line as that was,
Goliath!
I think it's important to understand something here. That was a show advocating that kids kill Nazis. Like, the Toads were space Nazis. The Bucky O'Hare group was a group of just small freedom fighters fighting against the oppressive regime that was the amphibians, literally led by basically a fucking mecha Hitler, space Hitler sort of creature, you know? Now, if that sounds familiar, Hitler. Let's remember, of course, that this became a thing for a bit. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's important to realize that sometimes life imitates art and art imitates life, and sometimes we have to be cognizant of that fact and not dismissive of of children's fucking shows and whatnot and how prescient they can be. But that's why it is that shows like the Rugrats were so endemic. Like this may seem like a little silly kids little thing or whatever about babies, and it is for all intents and purposes. But there's a story going on behind the scenes of parents living with these kids and having to deal with the daily life of suburban life there. That's why, for example, Ed and Eddie, Ed and Eddie was so universally, sorry, misspelled it. That's so universally well liked amongst a lot of fucking adults like me, because it's basically like just kids doing their thing and having their own little area, whatever. It's like basically the whole like Freudian psychology. There's the ego. This is a super ego. This is the id. This is the ego, and whatnot. Act, and you can go around or whatever. Sometimes Ed Double D is like the super ego. Other times Eddie is like the id. Other time it's like switches up a lot from episode to episode from time to time. And you only really know it if you understand Freudian psychology, really. And there's like shows like Beavis and Butthead that kids watched as well, and I watched too. There's a lot of these shows that go from various different cartoons to like either sell toys or to do this or to do that or to actually be artistic. When in reality of it is, it's all art, all of it. All media can be art. Now there's highbrow and there's lowbrow art. I'm not going to disagree about that because it's obviously a thing there. You can consider He-Man, but the reality of it is that you can consider He-Man lowbrow art, sure, and you can consider an unholy bit of a corporation going on there, sure, but like there's more to it than just nostalgia going on here, and you're not really actually fully engaging the fullness of the psychological underpinnings of it all. But I'm kind of like rambling here, so let's go and continue on to the main thing that set me off here. I mean, I kind of showed. Let's watch 10 seconds of a random episode of Master of the 2002 Masters of the Universe. 2002 Masters of the Universe episodes. Let's just pick a random fucking episode of the goddamn shit here, shall we? Let's pick a totally random episode here. In fact, let's just pick moments here, shall we?
It's a long journey and it won't be easy.
I would do anything to protect Eternia. Give up my very life if necessary.
Yes, well, now listen close. You must journey first, past the corridors of Lythos.
entrance lead in, but only that pathway has footsteps leading out.
If you make it through, your final destination stands before you. Mount Imperium. But to reach it, you must cross the entire sands of time.
Rest here, old friend. I will return for you.
Now, for anyone wondering what the fuck this is, real quick, this is basically Adam's ancient ancestor, King Grayskull, through which the mountain was actually named after, at least in this version, anyways. Now, for the record, this entire story is being told to Adam by the sorceress. So yeah. So yeah, this characterization of Orko as Oracle is history. Okay, now we've already gone through this. There's a bit of goofiness in here, obviously that there is, but there's an element of seriousness in this particular context that, when actually given any context to the actual episode, is just that, an actual episode with a moral and with a meaning and with a purpose and whatnot. To point out the simple fact that even if you survive, even if you beat someone, you're not always going to go ahead and be the most surviving element of it. Sometimes your legacy will be the thing that helps teach other people. So yeah, it's like, it's meant to indicate that some threats are never truly. In the end of it, really, the episode is meant to indicate. I think it's a two-part episode. It's meant to indicate that some threats are always eternal. And only by understanding the past and the messages of the past can we understand the current issues of the future that our present face. So yeah, you could call it a cynical You could call it like a cynical historical approach to history, but it definitely has its values, and it leads into elements of philosophy as well. Now, Rick Worley's going to say, it's just a kid's thing. You're just having nostalgia for kids stuff. No, I'm taking the actual text of what's putting forth, applying depth of the author to it, and pointing out the simple fact that, hey, this was meant to be taken seriously by a certain audience member, by a certain audience cadence. What does that audience, growing up on it, have to say and have to engage with in a philosophical, contextual sense if these people imbibe these kinds of things? Like, it's the reason why you have, for example, specific channels like this. Lore lockdown. Sorry. Anyways, this guy is awesome. He goes through a lot of He-Man shit. He goes through a lot of other masculine stuff. But man, he is fantastic. And the reason why he goes over this stuff is to give a philosophical branch of these kinds of things to the various different lore and what they say. I mean, if you just type up meaning, it's like, so yeah, it's like, so yeah, it's just that. Like, he's just trying to give philosophical meaning to these various different elements of pop culture, of these characters in their universe, by taking them seriously, in this sense, to get forth messages of meaning. That's not nostalgia, that's just finding philosophical meaning in stuff that you don't find philosophical meaning in. And apparently your philosophical meaning is, the artist. The artist is the most thing. The artist. We have to consider the artist. What about death of the author, motherfucker? Ever consider that?
Terrifying to contemplate.
That's the thing that kind of pisses me off, the fact. Is the fact that you think that silliness is something to be laughed at and disregarded. When in fact, silliness is a teaching thing. Something can be silly while teaching you something. I mean, for fuck's sake, Beavis and Butthead taught us so much about how advertisement, about how media affects our minds and our brains, negatively speaking. Taught us how not to act, how not to react, how not to assume shit, how not to engage with certain ideas in certain ways, you know? That's what that is. And it's like, you think silly, by your logic, Beavis and Butthead is so fucking silly, it can't be taken serious, right? That distinguishing characteristic, by the way, of adult art is what really, really pisses me off, because there's no such thing as adult art, motherfucker. There's art. Just art. Unvarnished, unfucking, just uncompromising, just art, okay? Now, there's soulless art, and then there's art with a soul. He-Man clearly has soul in it, despite it coming from a place that would grind its metaphysical dust into nothing and repackage it to you as if it's something. Like, art is art, okay? Whether it's art made for children or art not made for children. Like, you're basically having a fandom menace moment here with Masters of the Universe here. And this is frankly fucking embarrassing, man. Holy fucking Christ. That's the point I wanted to make here, by the way. Oh, and for the record, when I made this point about C.S. Lewis, this is what I got here. Theologian was also a well-regarded theologian, a scholar, and wrote for adults and children. I came back with, by the way, with this, saying, you're abusing his work, unfortunately. His work His work for adults was to give them apologetic, dishonest arguments to defend your faith. His quote about fairy tales meant for kids was always meant to be revisited and appreciated as adults. Hence why he said that part at the end there. He is literally saying this so he can continue to write stuff for audience for his audiences. He lived in a time of extreme philosophical skepticism of God and made his Narnia books as a Protestant answer to Tolkien's Catholic work. Portraying him as just some author who expected you to do certain things, like you're saying, is to engage in historical revisionism, my guy. You're interpreting his work in the modern era, and not in the era he actually wrote in with his biases. Whether Rick says he enjoyed them isn't the point. The point is that there is no such thing as art meant for a specific age group. Why do you think shows like the Rugrats hit hard for a lot of suburban families to this day? Art speaks, and it doesn't matter if it was for children or not, because that is immaterial, and all they matter is perspective. So yeah, this is a problem with this guy here. He seems to think that art should be viewed from a specific kind of lens or whatever, and real cinema is where it's at. When the reality is that there's no such thing as real cinema. There's cinema, and then there's corporate slop. That's what you get. That's the distinguishing factor. And was He-Man corporate slop? No, it wasn't. It clearly came out of place during a time in which things were kind of just strange there. And in fact, a lot of shows, a lot of cartoons being released or whatever, are being picked up by adult men who actually want the cartoon to continue and don't give two flying fucks about the toy line. That's why Netflix has become so popular recently with releasing different shows, you know? And it's one of the reasons why there's a bit of a growing pain going on here, because the fight is not between nostalgia versus adulthood. The fight is between corporate baked bullshit, soulless art, and actual art made with a soul. So yeah,